Before we get into the episode, I just want to take a second and say thank you very much to my friends and my family. They've been very supportive with this. It gets very hard to go to a full time job and then work on this afterwards. So, the fact that you guys are listening and following along means a lot to me. And those who are contributing to it, it means so much I can't put into words. So, this is the first episode with a guest. I plan to have many more on, and I'm very happy with this episode. Hopefully, you guys are too. If you are interested in being a guest or co host as well, and you're enjoying the series, send a quick email. Contacts will be listed at the end. Thank you, and let's get into it. Yeah, see. Thanks for joining, everyone. Welcome back, all of you flyers, writers, and writers. This is a pretty big episode. I have my first guest. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Kaylee Reed. I go by Kale also.
Awesome. All right. So we're going to be finishing out the book. We got a couple chapters to go. Then after that, we'll have a little mini interview, some questions and theories as we're going through. Hopefully, you just interrupt me whenever you have a thought, and we'll go from there. Last week, we left off with David having the dream. Liz and Lucy were singing and explaining the story in the background of Guinevere and Gawain, and David was having to go through this process to kind of rekiln and get back with in touch with Gadzooks. So as they're going down, David's hearing the drum of the music. From what I understand, there wasn't really any music going. Lucy was just kind of humming in the background. But as he's going, they're saying that in the story, Guinevere is singing to Gawain, and it's over the period of a week. 7 days, 7 nights. Gawain will come by, pick up Guinevere, or stay by the stream while she's singing him a song. They don't really say what the song is about or what any of the lyrics are, just that it touches Gawain deep. He can feel it. Guinevere is very in touch with Gawain's feelings as well, and just feels that the dragon is very sad. He's one of his last kind, doesn't have a place to go or anyone to have companionship with. So, as he's starting to lose his strength each and every day, Guinevere is not sure what to do. She's looking for help. She goes to the villagers. The villagers are pretty scared, and she ends up talking to somebody named Gwilana. And Gwilana is seems to be maybe a witch doctor, somebody ancient. They don't really give her an age, but they just say that she's wise and has some knowledge from beyond the normal of dragons. Gwilana goes on to say that she needs some form of payment from Guinevere, and a couple of days previous, Gawain had dropped a scale. Guinevere had been holding on to that for a long time, didn't want to give it up. It was very precious because a gift from a dragon is, I don't know how to explain that, is very, it's special, almost religious, I would say. So Guilana demands payment. Guinevere hands over very reluctantly, but hands over the scale. And Guilana's has a very interesting reaction. She just gives that evil laugh, or what I perceive to be an evil laugh, saying that she needed to join the dragon in fire and in water. She laughs, and then that's the last bit of it. Guinevere doesn't get an answer. So towards the end, Guinevere's singing to Gawain at the end. Gawain lays down his head, his tail's weak, and he sheds his fire tear. It's this tear that's just like any normal tear, but inside is a glowing violet fire. Guinevere sticks out her hands and cups it. And when I was thinking about this and picturing it, just the sheer magnitude and the size of Gawain made me wonder the size of this tear. You know, if she is she picking it up and it's like a barrel just over your head? Is it heavy? What does fire feel like in your hands? Doesn't give a very good description from when it happened with Guinevere. And then all of a sudden, the dream just kind of cuts off. There's no answer to it. Guilana didn't give Guinevere any information or instructions on after what to do with the tear. And then David wakes up. The dream's cut off, and he's wondering about Gadzooks. He's going back and forth, needs to see what's going on, wants to make sure that there's still time. Out of nowhere, we get the first actual interactions with the dragons. Now it's not a trick of the light, maybe some imagination thing from David. We get to see the dragons flying around. I believe it was Gruffin, the security guard dragon, that comes flying, kind of lands and stumbles here and there. But he looks like he's worried a little bit. He's anxious. He's trying to get David's attention. And David recognizes this, and he's looking outside, there's nobody around, it's late at night. He's calling out for Liz and Lucy, but from what I was gathering, they didn't give a time, but I'm guessing it's probably around like 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning, just dead. So David figures it out. He's like, all right, he's in the dragon's den. They walk up there. Well, they don't walk up. David walks up there. Gruffin's on his shoulder, and they're interacting. Gruffin blows, maybe not fire, but kind of warms up David's neck and hurrying. There's no talking, but David just gets the gist of it. He's starting to talk dragon, per se. So then they get in there, and Gadzooks is all alone on the potter's wheel. When he enters, it's explained as David feels the tension in the air, that it's a warm welcome, but not a friendly one. There's a little bit of anger and animosity towards David just because you're not supposed to make a dragon cry. And Gadzooks has been neglected or hurt by what's been going on the past couple of days. And Lucy, if we remember, had taken him up there so that he wasn't as sad. David's trying to talk to Gadzooks, but it seems like it's almost a little too late. He's looking everywhere, and all the dragons are all eyes on him, paying attention, and he can see Gadzooks' tears starting to fall. So David remembers the story, puts out his hands, catches it as well. And we do get a little bit of a description when he caught the tear. He said that it didn't burn, but he could feel the sensation from his head to his toes just in the nervous systems. So I'm guessing one of those times where, like, if you take a shot of alcohol or something, you just feel it go all the way through. Then it's that kind of same sensation. It didn't hurt him, it didn't burn or anything. And so David wasn't sure what to do. This was the last point in the dream that he got to. And he starts asking. He looks over at Gruffin, he looks over at the dragons on the shelf, and then out of nowhere, Guilana appears. And I wasn't sure if this was part of a dream, if David was still dreaming. I've had dreams several times where I've like woken up, gone through the process of my day, brushed my teeth, almost started heading to work, and then woke up again for real. So I wasn't sure if we were in a double dream type situation, but we never got another wake up scene. So from what I am gathering, this actually happened. That the same lady from this ancient story magically appeared into the room and started giving David instructions too. He was confused because she said that he needed to join her, join Gadzooks in water as well. David ends up crying. The tears join, releases the fire. Then David needs to re-kiln Gadzooks, blows the fire into his nose. Gadzooks does a weird little inward sneeze type thing, and then they have to re-kiln him. And this was kind of a big scene. We finally get to see, was it Gwendolyn? No, it wasn't Gwendolyn. It was the queen. Guinevere, the dragon, was able to interact. She opened her eyes, and we've had questions about this the whole time. David, the first time he had seen her, didn't know if she was praying or if she was just focusing really hard. She was in a stance that wasn't too obvious. Sophie had brought that up too the first time that she was in the dragon's den. So it's always been a question. But when Guinevere opens her eyes, they're violently violet. And they kind of explain, Gruffin's going through his instruction books showing David what he needs to do, and Guinevere just starts blasting fire at Gadzooks in order to re-kill him. And as that's happening, you can see all the other dragons shift and pay attention to one coming from the back of the shelves. That one is Gwaine. Now, I have so many questions about Gwaine because we've seen that Guinevere and Gwendolyn both represent Liz and Lucy, respectively, with their features almost resembling dragon like in David's eyes. And that's always made me wonder, who is Gawain then? If Gawain is supposed to be the father, have we just not met the father? Is he not real? Is it Immaculate Conception? I am confused and I want some answers right now. But so anyway, so Gwen comes out of the back and starts blasting Gadzooks as well, and he's getting double teamed, Eiffel Towered by these flames, and says that Gadzooks is just basking in it. Must feel great for him. He's getting rejuvenated with life again. And at the end of it, David and Gadzooks have a nice little conversation. David telling him that he really does love him and that it's time. Gadzooks is looking at his pad, and there's a half-written message, and David's looking at it. Gadzooks looks like he's super excited and way better feeling. And then he finishes his note, and it finishes out saying Wuzzle. David seems to not be confused anymore and knows the ending of his story. And that brings us to the end of that chapter. So that was pretty heavy one, pretty lore deep. We got some more to the story, but brings up even more questions. Who the fuck is Guilana? Why is she still alive? Is she real, or is she just a magical being that can be summoned at any time? Those are my questions. What did you think about this?
So I one thing I really like tacked on to was when they were talking about Guana and they called her a crone. Um,
I don't know what crone
okay, I
means.
was gonna say I don't know if you're familiar with that. So crone, a lot of times, my first introduction to it, I almost want to like call it a character of a crone is in like tarot readings and like things like that. A crone is like often just like a very old wise woman, but specifically a crone will be like associated with being either like disagreeable or evil, just sinister in some sense. That's not always the case. They don't have to be like necessarily like malicious. They're either evil or they're just very heavily disliked by people for one reason or another.
Yeah, that's kind of what I got from it too. Just the description of it gave me maybe not witch doctor vibes, but just that old lady that's isolated out in the woods in a
Mhm.
cabin that just kind of freaks you out and you don't know anything, but she's got that ancient. I want to know how she got that information. Why are you so knowledgeable on these dragons even though you're not interacting with them? It doesn't seem like she has a very good bond with them.
Yeah, I have a theory maybe that she is a dragon.
Oh, okay, kind of like a shapeshifter.
Yeah, of some kind. Well, because I mean, been implied to that like Liz is a dragon. You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
her eyes changing color, that whole thing. So that kind of makes me wonder in this story, because I've only read this first book. So
right.
in this series, like, are people dragons, or is it just that they have like a special energy within them that allows them to connect, especially
Mm,
with dragons?
yeah.
And so if that is the case, then I definitely think she's a dragon. If instead it's that they just have like a special connection, then honestly I think it wouldn't be crazy if like I always forget her Gwenola,
Gwendolyn.
the crone.
Oh, Guilana.
Guilana. Yeah, I would wonder if Guilana is like the only person who is also a dragon.
Well, I never really thought about it that way, but now that you bring that up, we were talking a little bit before we started recording about how I like the name structure of the dragons always having G, and
Right,
Guilana
and her
does
name
have
is
a
a G.
G.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
so to me, that makes me wonder if, like, maybe there's because they talk about the special people.
yeah.
If, like, people like Liz and Lucy are special people, but that someone like Guilana is a dragon.
Yeah. Something I should bring up too is Kaylee brought it up and she's right. She's only read up to this point. I'm keeping her spoiler free so that when she comes on, she only has that information to that point. I've read this, but again, like I've said, it's been about 15 years for some of these books. So I do know some of the major points, but I forget a lot of it as well. And that's why some of these questions that I have, I can't remember if they're answered or not either. But what I was getting from it is I I think they have a special connection with the dragons because if
Mhm.
Gwaine is supposed to be the last
Right.
dragon, Um,
Right, I wondered if maybe Guilana was actually the real last dragon, but that she'd kept herself in hiding so that she could keep it alive
yeah,
somehow.
yeah, because then you're not hunted or anything.
Right,
There's
that
not
was
that.
kind of a thought that maybe I had. I also just thought it was interesting that when he was dreaming it, when Lucy was singing the song and Liz was telling the story, that he was immediately suspicious of Guilana.
Yeah, yeah.
Like
Well,
he was like, I don't trust her, just
it,
right off the bat. And Liz kind of brushed it off and was like, yeah, okay. Anyway,
yeah. You know what I've noticed? This author, Chris Lacey, he does a really good job of making you feel, even though this is supposed to be made for younger children,
hmm
the darker parts, it's not a horror book, it's not a horror
no,
movie, you're not scared for your life, you're not gritting, but I definitely could, what he was aiming for, I could feel it in those points.
Mhm.
Earlier in the book when like the whole scenario with David going into Mr. Bacon's backyard and the whole
Yeah,
squirrel thing, there was some comedy in there when he was
sure.
stumbling around and going through. I kind of chuckled a couple
hmm
times. This last episode, we talked about it with you guys here in the audience that it was hard to read through because of the whole conquer thing and having a pet that passed away recently. And I planted a tree for my dog, same thing. And I was thinking about that after I read that. I completely forgot. So I don't know if I just kept that in my mind and did that subconsciously because I remember it from the book, or if it's just I do believe that it's awesome to have that cycle of life where you can feed more life
Totally.
with with another. So
Yeah. Well, and to that, I thought it was interesting because I didn't know that a conker was a name for a chestnut.
I still didn't know that
Yeah,
either.
yeah, so I looked it up because I was kinda confused because they were saying, like, how it was symbolic that they were planting specifically that tree, and I was like, "Why?"
I figured it was just because wasn't that like one of the first trees that they went and saw or they like found
Well, they
the
saw it in the library gardens,
yeah,
but I didn't think that it seemed that.
significant.
Yeah, I thought, like,
Yeah.
oak would have been
That makes
more
more
significant because
sense.
they lived in the oak tree,
See, and
so
that's what I was confused about
yeah.
too.
Yeah,
Okay,
so
that
I was
makes
kinda
way more
confused, so
sense.
I Googled what a conker is, and it's in, like, England and stuff, they call chestnuts
Yeah,
conkers,
yeah.
and so they planted that because that's what he was named after, so it was
Mm.
like planting a conker for
That's
conker.
funny. That means this guy just really likes to plant the name on the nose.
Yep.
So that makes me wonder about Guilana even more because there's no
Uh-huh.
way. Another thing you brought up too was actually when Sophie got her dragon and named her Grace.
Right.
There was no, or at least I don't remember a conversation between her, Liz, and Lucy and David about the naming process of their
Right, and she
dragons.
might have been like, "Oh, well, they have," like, she did know, about
Their
Gawain and
dragons.
Gwendolyn and all that, so she could have been like, "Oh, I'll go with the G2," but I don't think that was, like, on the forefront of her mind. I think truly that was, like, a coincidence that's probably not actually a coincidence.
Right, right. Yeah,
I think there's something
exactly.
with the G names, like, every single dragon has a G name,
Yeah, yep,
you know?
and I like I said, I think this guy just writes what he knows and it's on the nose. So like David
Yeah.
Rain, he's supposed to be white as rain. He's supposed to be pure and innocent and this jolly good guy, which so far we haven't really seen too many flaws other than this guy's just kind of oblivious and dumb sometimes,
Y
you
and he
know?
gets grumpy very easily.
Yeah, well, I think that's just all
I mean,
younger
he's
men.
20 years
Yeah, I was
old,
gonna
so
say,
I
I think
had to
that's
give him
all
some
younger
grace
men.
for that. I was like, "Alright, he's a moody teenager,
That was what
basically."
that's what I had to get comfortable with too, because some of the interactions, especially with Sophie coming in, I just had to be like, dude, this is I mean, I'm not most the suavecito either, but like you can pick up on some hints, brother.
Yeah,
Come on.
yeah, totally.
Okay, so let's get on to the next chapter. It'd be chapter 41, maintaining the link. This must be, I'm not sure if this was a day later or a couple of days later, but David is talking to Sophie and he's trying to explain what's going on. Sophie just thinks that he's joking, maybe a little bit crazy. I would think with how serious David was being, if I was Sophie, I'd be a little concerned. Be like, man, you've been on this for a while now. Like, let's talk to Liz or something. But David's going back and forth saying that he really saw them, they were interacting, they're real. Sophie will crack a couple jokes here and there. But they're talking about how they're making plans to go. plant this tree that we were just talking about, that's actually happening now. And Sophie says that it's good that they're maintaining the link. This is very nice, very symbolic, and kind of like I was talking about earlier, it's just that cycle of life. Conquer, even though he's a squirrel and there's not going to be much food, it's the idea that you're going to plant a tree, his body's going to feed it, and that tree's going to be there for, hundreds and hundreds of years. And every time they go back, they'll at least have something to think about and know that they did something nice. It might not have changed the world, but for Lucy and for David, they helped a little squirrel and was able to grow and bond together. Really strong bond, which I think you said it best that this was not really a book about dragons. And my first thought was it was more about squirrels, but it really is, when it comes down to it, a book of complete strangers coming together with a bond. And I got a very big older brother, younger sister vibe from it.
Yeah, I hope you don't mind if I step in right
No,
here
yeah, no,
because
please.
I yeah, I was shocked that the squirrels were such a big part of this story at first, and then I kind of realized the maintaining the link, that being the name of that chapter, really made me realize like, okay, this isn't about squirrels. It isn't even really about dragons. This is about like this circle of life, this connection to nature and living things and how we keep things going. Um and I kind of was a little bit shocked that Sophie was almost like doubting David. I was kind of shocked because she seemed to be so in tune with everything else that they were about up until
Mm,
this point.
yeah,
I felt like when he was being like, "Oh, the dragons aren't real," she was the one that was being like,
yeah,
"Oh, like,
playing
come
around
on,
with
stop
it.
it. Like,
Yeah,
they are real. You have to love them." She was playing into it. She was so it shocked me when he finally like actually believed it that now she's
she's kind of
pulling back
brushing
and
it
being
off.
like, "No,
Yeah,
like
I
that's silly." And
when
like,
I was reading
yeah.
that, I took that as like she was kind of flirting with him and trying to be nice and like not call him crazy, crazy.
Yeah.
And then now that he's starting to really like be like, hey, like this isn't, I'm not imagining shit.
Mhm.
Now she's starting to question it and has to be like, hey, let's reel it in a little bit. But I can't, I do remember certain things, but I thought there must be another listening dragon that
Mm.
comes into play because I remember there being a listening dragon. And for those that don't know, well, maybe no, I explained it in the podcast when she got the dragon. Grace is a listening dragon. She's got the shell ears, and she's able to hear. Didn't give any parameters, and I was still questioning if Grace was a special dragon or not. Did you
Mhm.
catch that? Because well, I remember in that chapter they were saying that she or maybe not even in that chapter, it was way before when David first went in. Liz had multiple shelves, and she said that there were some special
Yeah.
dragons and some not special dragons that anybody could have. And from what I gathered of it, it seemed like Sophie grabbed a special dragon because Liz and Lucy said the only ones that were off limits were Gwendolyn, Gwaine,
Mhm.
and Guinevere. So
Right.
the main trio. But if you're gonna give her a special dragon, it makes me think Sophie's gonna be around for a little bit.
Yeah, I definitely think she is. I mean, they introduced her as somebody who, like I said, that's why it surprised me that she was brushing him off so much because they definitely introduced her as a character that seems like is going to be a pretty big ally.
Yeah,
And so it did that's why it shocked me so much that she seemed to kind of like be like, "Oh no, like that's you're being a little bit silly."
yeah,
So I think that Grace is a special dragon, but as far as I'm aware, they did not confirm that.
yeah. That's what I didn't think they confirmed it either. So I've always had that in the back of my mind. Yeah. Okay. So they're going to maintain the link, and they're planting this tree. Once they get done, then that actually brings us to the end of the chapter as Lucy is asking them all to say nice things. So they all take turns going back and forth, and then we finally get into David's turn, and that's the end of that chapter, and then we go into the next chapter. So David brings out his story and says, instead of saying something nice, I'd like to share this. And we remember from last time when David had attempted to write the end of the story, he was in his feelings things had just taken place with Conquer. He was dead, and David felt pretty miserable, and like his efforts were all for naught. And so he had wrote that sloppy, well, I wouldn't call it sloppy, just a quick and insincere ending that nobody was really satisfied with. And so he brings out this piece of paper that he grabbed before heading out of the house and starts to read it aloud. And I might take a little bit, but I did want to read this. It made me tear up a little bit, but it was a good ending to the story because, as we know, Conquer did die, and David didn't want to mess up the truth with it. And I thought this was a solid ending. I'd like to say something for all the squirrels. This is the end of Snigger and the Nut Beast. Second draft, specially rewritten. He lifted an eyebrow at Lucy. She looked at her mom, who pressed a finger to her lips. One blustery afternoon in the library gardens, Snigger was sitting at the edge of the duck pond when Ringtail came bounding up. Have you heard the news? Ringtail puffed. Cherry Lee is going to have Conker's draylings. Snigger sat up in surprise. I thought Birchwood was chasing Cherry Lee. Ringtail kicked a flea from behind his ear. He was, until Conker came. Then he got all soppy and let Conker chase her around instead, except that Conker couldn't chase her with his funny eye. So she let him catch up to her. Snigger cleared a knot of mud from his claws and spat it grumpily onto the ground. Pfft, she never lets me catch her. I don't blame her, muttered Ringtail, but Snigger didn't hear. Lucy giggles into her hands. Where is Conker? Ringtail asked. Wuzzled off, said Snigger, as casually as he might crunch open a nut. Ringtail's eyes almost popped out of his head. We were digging in the flowers near his tree, said Snigger, when he jumped up onto the grass, looked up to the library with his not-so-good eye, yawned a bit, and said he loved it here, that he'd never been happier since he met me. He must have chewed a bad nut, muttered Ringtail. Then he stretched out and wuzzled off. Oh dear, I'm going to cry, sniffled Liz, fiddling in her pocket for a tissue. Lucy slipped her hand into David. What happened next? David flicked his eyes back over the page. Snigger turned around. The sun was beginning to set in the tree tops, covering the gardens in the marmalade glow. The nut beast and the little girl took him, he said. They buried him like a nut. A tear ran down Sophie's cheek. Ringtail twitched his whiskers in approval. When I wuzzle off, I'm going to find a nut beast, he said. You couldn't find an acorn in a plant pot, joked Snigger, and he whisked away with Ringtail in pursuit. Away they bobbed under the willow tree into the clearing toward the great oak. High above the sun winked in the pale October sky. Leaves tumbled freely in the wind, filling up the paths and the flower beds and lawns like pieces of slowly forming jigsaw puzzles. Beneath the tall horse chestnut tree, a cool breeze rustled over the ground. Somewhere in the distance, the library clock bonged. A mallard quacked, a pigeon cooed. The sun sank gently over Scrubbly and the library gardens. And the library gardens, like Conquer, were at peace. The end. Ugh. I think this started one of those things that I really enjoy when it comes to a story being told, whether it's a movie, a TV series, a book. I don't necessarily, everybody likes a happy ending. Awesome. I like a realistic, good ending. Animals die. People leave. Sometimes you don't hit your goal, and we have to deal with those things, and we have to be okay with those things. And this was a really nice way for a children's book of all things to really hit on and to grasp. These last couple chapters with the cycle of life was pretty tough, but with this story, it is just a book, but it shows that with a little bit of persistence and wherewithal, you can create something really beautiful. And the end of that book was just really sweet, or book story, short story, whatever you want to call it. It was only a couple chapters long and something that this 20-year-old had written for a little girl, but it was still overall something that I think is going to lead David on into the future. He does. I'm not sure if it was Liz or Sophie that says that he should keep doing it and that he could make some
Mhm.
money, but he does bring up that he's got plans to write stories. And so they have a conversation and then end up going home, but that really brings us to the end of the book. And that's the end of this first journey. It's pretty big. I appreciate everybody for going along with me, but now we're just going to kind of talk and theorize a little bit and bring up questions. So now I'm going to turn this over since I have read the series and have majority of the things. I want to know what were your first thoughts reading into it? What do you want to see going forward? And what are your theories?
Okay. Before I get into that, I do want to mention, because I really appreciated this in his new ending for his story, that when he said that Conquer, wuzzled off, and that he said it casually, just like it's a normal regular thing. I appreciated that as well, because I think that was for Lucy. I think that was his way of reminding Lucy that, like, the squirrels aren't sad. They know this is just what happens and it's just part of life, and life cycles on, Conqueror's gonna have babies with Cherry Lee, and that's
That
gonna
is
continue him on and stuff. And, like, I think that was for Lucy to be like, hey, like, the squirrels aren't sad,
Yeah, I
you
did
know?
like that addition of the Draylings because that then
Yeah.
leaves behind an extra little legacy per
Yeah, and it's
se.
another, like, callback to this, like, cycle, this maintaining the link, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, one thing that I always brought up, man, this is tough because it goes into the other books. So in this book, especially my first time reading it through, I was not sure what was going on. I wasn't sure if Gadzooks has a connection with the world
Mhm.
and was telling David what to write, or if Gadzooks and David have an almost premonition ability where they write
Yeah.
what's going to happen.
I kind of think it's a mixture of both.
Yeah, okay.
That's, like, at least where my brain was at with that, because I think Gadzooks can't necessarily see into the future, but I think he has just, like, a really innate connection,
Right.
and that his intuition maybe is very strong. And I think that but I think that David, I feel like David seems to be a special human of some kind,
Yeah, yeah,
because the
yeah.
fact that what he was writing ended up literally happening, that, like, little
Almost
scramble in the
word for
gardens.
word. Yeah.
Yeah, like, that's and that wasn't, like, precluded by, like, a a vision of Gadzooks writing something. That was all him. And sure, we know that Gadzooks probably has some sort of, like, connection with what he's writing, but normally when it's something straight from Gadzooks, he sees it, you know?
Mhm.
And so that was kind of all him. So I think David might have some premonition
Yeah, yeah. Well,
abilities.
I mean, it would make sense, especially if we're bringing in somebody like Willana, who obviously has
Mhm.
some kind of magical stuff.
Right. There
That's
are magical people.
yeah. That's the other thing. And I wanted to talk to you about this so much, but it's been hard to hold back.
Mhm.
Is you had questions on where this was set
Yeah. Yeah.
location wise, and from what I understand, right, this author is English,
Right.
and so I figured it was he was basing it somewhere in England.
I assumed that when you first told me that this author was from England or whatever, but they make very specific mentions in the beginning of the book that imply that the characters are American.
Oh, okay. I just
Um,
must not have picked that up then.
there's a point, this was the one that made it very obvious to me. There's a point where David was supposed to be home sooner or whatever than he was. He got home late or whatever. And I can't remember if it was Lucy or Liz, but one of them asked him, like, where he'd been, and he sarcastically said, "Oh, I was with the president walking the dog around the White House."
Oh, oh, you're
And so
right.
to me, why would a British person make that joke? Because
Oh
it wouldn't
man.
make any sense.
Yeah,
They'd
yeah,
say something
yeah.
about, like, having lunch with the queen,
Oh
That's what they would
man.
have said.
That even brings up, oh, you guys know that I've had this thing about the rain in the book. What did you think about that? Did you think there was a lot of rain?
There was a lot of rain, but there's also a lot of places in America that rain a lot,
Yeah.
so
Yeah,
but
okay.
I think honestly, and I mean no offense to the author at all, but I think he seemed to struggle a little bit with keeping his Englishness out of the
Yes,
book, because if
yes.
it's supposed to be set in America, there were like, the amount of tea being mentioned,
Tea
that's
and
just
the
not a big thing in
food. The
America, and the
food.
beans on
That's
toast.
what
I
I
was
was gonna
like,
say.
American David
Sausages.
would not be eating beans on toast.
Sausages with beans and toast, man. What? Yeah, exactly. Okay.
Yeah, so I do think it was intended to be set in America, but that way too many, like, English things just
Right.
worked their way in.
Right, which to be fair, I mean, I'm trying to work on my
Right,
own book
very
as well.
difficult.
Yeah, I would do the same thing. I'm going to
Of
write what I
course.
know, but I just thought it was interesting because what I've noticed too, and it would be very hard to remember everything that goes on in your book,
Of
but
course.
there would be times where he would mention rain and it'd be in the same chapter, and then magically it's just like not raining. And I don't need it to be mentioned every time, but if
Sure.
you're going to say like, hey, it's a torrential downpour right
And
now,
suddenly it's
and
sunny.
yeah, and then suddenly they're outside doing stuff and
You
there's
gotta
no
have a
mention.
comment, you gotta be like, "Oh, the rain just seemed to disappear."
Right, right, exactly. So that kind of
That's
got me
funny.
too. But then my question was because yours was about location, mine was time frame. Because
Mhm.
they do so we know that it's at least supposed to be real world.
Yes.
And what I liked about it and what really sucked me in, because what you had brought up is that you're not really a big fan of what I would say, not just dragons, but I would say like the fantasy
Yeah.
genre as a
Yeah.
whole, because it's kind of hard to grasp. It's not really real. It's hard to
Mhm.
connect, and I understand that. And a lot of them are written by men and you just have big old battle scenes and it's not
Yeah.
very but this series is rooted in modern day,
Mhm.
so there's a good mix between what we can understand and we
Mhm.
know, and it's easier for us to connect with.
Yeah.
But when I was thinking about the time frame, they have a couple mentions of computers here and there, but like there was no mentions of watching TV, right?
Right.
There was no TV shows, no serial, anything going
Yeah.
on, which to be fair in London, or London
He
in
did
England.
bring up TV actually at one point.
Okay.
Because when, Lucy was talking about wanting to make like, live in a tree house in the library gardens or whatever,
Oh yeah.
that he convinced her not to because she wouldn't be able to watch TV.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. But I just noticed that it wasn't as prevalent as you would
Mm-mm.
think it is today, at least.
Yeah, or, like, he was watching soccer at one point, but yeah,
Oh,
it's
yeah,
really
yeah,
only
yeah.
brought up, like, 2
A
or 3
couple times
times,
here and
yeah.
there, which makes me feel good because nowadays we have a hard time with just keeping kids being active and outside. So
Yeah,
the
that's
fact that
true.
Lucy was excited and active and wanting to be out there was cool to see a kid wanting to do that. And she has quite the imagination. Oh, one thing I also forgot to mention is that David made a promise to Lucy about helping all of the garden animals that they might come across. And Lucy says that she saw the hedgehog,
Mhm,
and then David sees that Gadzooks wrote down Spiky and underlined it
mhm.
twice for him. So I'm not sure where that's gonna go. I don't remember the
Yeah, I
hedgehog.
liked that because I kinda made a note about that because I was thinking about how, we were talking about again, like, the maintaining the link and the circle of life and all that stuff. I think whether or not the hedgehog and animals continue to be, like, a recurring thing that they just continue to be saving different types of animals, I don't know that, but even if that's not the case, it just kind of, like, reminds you that life is cyclical, like, they just finished this whole squirrel debacle, and he's like, "Okay, cool, the squirrel thing's done with," and now they're like, "Just kidding, hedgehogs this
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
Like, you're not
Book
done, you're
2.
never done,"
Yeah, exactly. And that's really how it is. Because I don't know, when I first started writing my book, I then had many ideas on where I wanted to go, and then books
Mhm.
that would be set in that universe, but not
Yeah,
with those characters. So you
sure.
just keep on going on branches on branches. Yeah, your
Yeah,
job is never
yeah.
done.
Well, and back to what you're saying about trying to figure out the time frame, I had looked it up, and this book was released in 2001.
Okay.
So, I imagine it probably takes place around that
Yeah,
time.
that's kind of what I fear. I figured late
It seemed
90s,
to,
early
yeah, it seemed
2000s.
to, like, it reminded me a little bit of, like, my childhood,
Yeah.
screens was not a big part of my childhood, I was aware of a computer and I could work a computer,
Yeah.
you know? It's yeah, so it seems to me late '90s, early 2000s seems to be when this takes place,
Yeah, I would
um,
very much agree
and
because
Lucy's young enough that she wouldn't really be super into anything techy and stuff yet anyway, you
yeah,
know?
she's just on
I
that
mean, yeah,
border.
she's just turning 11 in the book.
Yeah, it was her 11th birthday,
Yeah,
huh? Okay.
yeah, so she's a kid.
Yeah, I mean, that's a pretty cool present because, I mean, you got the initial one on your birthday, but then you kept getting parts of it for a couple
Yeah,
months. So, like,
yeah,
hey, man, it's most than I ever gotten. But, yeah, so, I mean, I kind of know where we're going for book two. I don't
sure.
remember all the stuff, but you've seen the cover of it,
Yeah.
right? And most of the covers
Mhm.
are very similar. They all have a dragon's eye
Yeah.
on the cover, and then usually in the eye, there's something reflecting that has to do with it.
Mhm.
I don't have the second book in front of me, um, but yeah, if you could look it up to
Mhm.
see what, don't read anything
No,
about
I
it,
won't.
but look at the cover and tell me what do you, or just even based off of this first book, where do you think we're going in this? What would you like the second book to
So
be?
I know it's called Ice Fire, and it's a white dragon with a fire tier, and its fire is orange.
Is it a fire tear on that one too? Interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So in my mind, I'm like, okay, Ice Fire, whatever. This is gonna be maybe like some different type of dragon. That's my thought, is like maybe a dragon that we haven't really been like introduced to yet. We've been introduced to just kind of more typical dragons, and that this is maybe like an atypical dragon,
Yeah.
like something a
Yeah.
little different.
You're right. So that was one thing I wanted to bring up is we got a big lore dump towards the end of the book, but we still only have really one story.
Hmm.
We only have one instance where a dragon was interacting.
Yeah, and it's heavily like biased
Yes.
because it's basically from Guinevere's point of view, because Guinevere's energy or whatever it is has been passed to Liz in a
Yeah,
sense.
yeah. So then
So,
that makes me wonder if it is another dragon. I mean, are we going to get more lore? Because that's what I want. I want
mhm,
some history on what happened to the dragons. If Gawain's the
yeah.
last one, and it seems like when the village went to go and attack him, the spears were bouncing off of him like straws.
Hmm.
So if these things are so massive and so strong, what happened to all these other dragons to kill them
Yeah.
off?
Yeah.
Unless it's just that they, are dying of old age.
Yeah, I wonder. This might sound a little bit silly, but I kind of think a little bit about like, this is going to sound so random, but I promise it connects. You remember the movie Elf?
Yeah.
Okay. So there's the whole thing like Santa's sleigh won't fly because people don't believe in him anymore.
Oh,
So I
okay.
kind of thought about that kind of idea, and maybe like there's something to be said about people no longer believing in more mystical things, and so they start to not be able to exist because
I
people don't
I
believe in them.
I like that idea, especially because I mean the throughout this whole book it's very important that you maintain your connection and your love to
Mhm.
this dragon.
Right, right. So if nobody's loving the dragons, if they're all just scared of them or trying
Right.
to like get away from them and like forget about them,
And you're right, because the only
then
time that Gawain comes down and interacts is when Guinevere is trying to
right,
connect with him.
right. And maybe at that point it was too late.
Yeah.
Like her connection, like if maybe she'd found him sooner or something, he could have kept going. But yeah, it seems to me that there's maybe some sort of connection in that sense of like the belief for them, the love for them, the respect at the very least for them, that like without that they can't
Yeah. So
continue.
another question that brings me up to Guinevere and everything is I mean they're described to be maybe not carbon copies, but
Sure.
very close. Liz, Lucy both have red hair, green
Right.
eyes, just like Guinevere.
Right.
So I know David made the connection and brought it up about them being descendants, but that then brings me up to the dad too. I really am starting to get a feeling of almost immaculate conception. Like they're just handing down these genes from the women because there's been no mention of the father.
Yeah, I
Because Sophie,
maybe this is the feminist in me, but I there's a part of me that hopes that just isn't relevant.
yeah, yeah,
I'm like, just let these women be magical and cool on their own. But then again, like having that connection of, I mean, we know nothing about Lucy's father, right?
right,
And there's obviously got to be something with that. Sophie brings it up,
right.
talking, she feels bad, she like cuts herself off and it's like, oh, maybe I shouldn't bring up the fact that she's a single
Yeah.
mother,
Well, and that's
you
what
know.
makes me think immaculate conception a little bit, because if
Right.
in my opinion that would make it a little bit more mystical because
It
there's
would be
no,
cool. It would be almost cooler. Like,
yeah,
yeah, there
yeah,
there is no father. They just these
whatever
people just came
magic.
from Guinevere and her magic, and
Yeah. So
you know.
then, oh, see, I don't even remember this. Okay, theory time from me. So Liz makes clay
Mhm.
dragons come to life with some magic. I'm
Something.
gonna I'm gonna
Yeah.
call it dragon magic, right? We got connections to that, and most of the time in any story that contains dragons, they're magical
Right.
beings. So I'm gonna call it dragon magic. I've been calling them dragon dreams.
Yeah.
It's connected somehow. But what if that line from Guinevere on has been immaculate concepting, not necessarily, but creating their own,
Mhm.
maybe starting with a clay baby
Right.
per se,
Yeah.
and then giving the same life that they give the dragons to Lucy or
Right,
to
like,
their
maybe Lucy
descendant.
doesn't have a father.
Right, yeah, that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like,
Yeah.
it's almost starting to feel like the father just isn't
Yeah.
real. There
Yeah.
just isn't a father.
I weirdly, I love that idea. Like, I do, and I sort of hope that that's the case, and I know if that ends up not being the case, I'll be a little disappointed, but I'm hoping that whatever it is instead is cool enough to make me be like, "Alright, it's fine."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So, is there anything you wanted to bring up? Any bullet points that we haven't hit?
Well, I had some theories, one related to that, the whole point of I remember because he when he looked at, Gwendolyn, he was like, "Oh, I see Lucy."
Right.
Right? When he looked at, Guinevere, the dragon, he was like, "I see Liz."
Mhm.
And when he looked at Gawain, he did not see anything. And sure, you could say, well, that's because he doesn't know the person that that dragon is connected to.
That was my first thought.
But I kind of wonder if maybe it's because that dragon is not connected to a person.
Right. Well, especially because yeah, yeah,
Like what we were just saying. Yeah.
he was supposed to be the last dragon.
Yeah.
So, um,
And so he might be the last dragon that has no human connection. And every other dragon has some sort of human connection, whether even if it's just that it was created by Liz,
yeah,
and
yeah.
that's its connection to humanity.
It makes me wonder too. Why clay? They didn't say? Was it a specific type of clay?
No, they didn't specify anything about the clay. It's definitely something I was like subconsciously like looking for when
Yeah,
I was reading because I wanted to know why clay, where that came from. And I kind of imagine it has something to do with like, Guinevere found some way to keep that fire alive, and that
yeah,
was through this kilning thing and
yeah,
this, that was how she kept things alive. And if the humans are dragons, like the special humans are dragons and not just have this connection, then I would imagine, like you were saying, she somehow had a baby, like Guinevere somehow had a baby that was like part dragon, part human. And then from
mm,
then on, that lineage was all people that were like
yeah.
part,
Partially, and that
yeah.
would explain Liz's eyes flashing. That would,
Right. Because that was crazy to me. Because I thought it was really interesting how when he was looking at the dragons before they'd ever come to life for him, he was like, oh, they all have green eyes.
right,
Like every single dragon has green eyes. And it's like, okay, yeah, Liz and Lucy have green eyes. So like, sure, I guess there's that. But when these dragons come to life, all their eyes are violet. Or at least what we've been described.
right.
Gruffins are violet,
I
Guinevere's are
think from
violet.
what I understand, they've all been
Right.
violet. Yeah,
And so that moment where he looks at Liz in the mirror and he sees her eyes turn violet, that to me is like, she's a dragon, right? Like,
right. So I know David. They brought it up. He said that he thinks that Guinevere somehow kept it.
hmm
And I agree. I just don't know how she would keep
right.
it. You know.
Yeah, I don't either. Like, maybe that is like something that they've been infused into this clay or
See, so that's what I'm thinking is that there's some like
it's
they're able
special
to tap
clay.
into it and
Yeah.
then like spread it out a little
Yeah,
bit.
something like that. And then now that there's more dragons, they can continue to collect this
Yeah.
whatever it is that they
Yeah.
can.
So then I mean, because we don't hear about these dragons eating anything,
Mhm.
are they
I
real
don't think that they
dragons?
are. I think like I don't think they're natural
Right.
dragons because I do think that Gawain was the last actual
Me too. Me
dragon
too.
and that these are just like the way that their spirits are kept alive in a sense.
What about their bodies? What do you think happens to their bodies? Because if that's a massive fucking dragon, there'd have to be some kind of proof or something.
It depends on how long ago though.
I
I
mean,
mean, it could
humans were
have.
here, right? We were.
Sure, but in a book like this, I imagine that it's kind of the way that we look at dinosaurs and things, where
Yeah,
it's like
yeah.
we can piece certain things together, but we don't know everything.
That's fair.
Like people will talk about all the time, like, yeah, if we built skeletons of like animals we know today, the way that we put together
Dinosaurs, we
dinosaurs, they
wouldn't
look
know.
nothing like that.
Yeah,
You know, so it's very possible that like even if dragons were real, they would just look like any other dinosaur bone.
yeah. I completely
And they
agree.
wouldn't think of it as anything special.
Yeah, I've always thought that if, and that's a very, very gigantic 98% if there were dragons, it would be that during that dinosaur time because nobody
Yeah,
was
how
there.
would you
Nobody, yeah,
know?
exactly.
And how would you know that they breathed
There
fire
was
and
gonna be,
flew and all
yeah,
this stuff? You
exactly.
wouldn't
There'd be
know
no
that.
way. So, I mean, I
Yeah.
don't put too much stock into it, but there is like a 2% chance on what if. So, yeah, yeah, I totally agree.
Hey, you're getting into there's some people that truly believe that dragons exist. They might disagree with you on the 2%.
Yeah, yeah. It's 98% actually.
But yeah, definitely the eye color thing really got to me. And I thought it was interesting that Sophie commented on the eye color thing, like when he told her, he was like, David was like, didn't you see like her eyes turn from green to purple? And Sophie completely dismissed that as anything special and instead was like, oh man, I wish my eyes would do that. They just go from like blue to darker blue
Did
sometimes.
she see that? I thought David
No,
was
she
just
didn't
telling her.
see it.
Okay,
She didn't
yeah,
see
yeah,
it,
yeah.
but he was telling her about it. Instead of her being like, oh, that's kind of weird,
Yeah,
like
yeah.
she could just completely brush it off as like, oh, I wish my eyes could be purple.
Yeah, Sophie's a very what I'd say, like a very prove it person. It has to be right here in front of me. I have to see it in order for her to believe it, kind of a
Yeah,
thing.
and I mean, David is that way too,
Yeah, that's fair. David's
Yeah,
had these
he was
experiences.
absolutely that way too. So, I wonder if that's gonna be a point of contention for the 2 of them, where he's like, "No, this is real," and she's like, "Dude, like, no, this is crazy." And he's gonna have to put together that like, "Hey, you also thought it was crazy, dude."
Right, yeah.
Like, he's gonna have to have a moment where he's like, "Man, I guess I also didn't believe this until I actually saw it and it happened to me." And I'm curious if there will be a like boy who cried wolf aspect at all in the future with like him and Sophie, where like
Mhm.
he tries to prove it to her and it doesn't work,
For so long,
or
yeah.
something like that. But I don't know. She seems to be special, and the fact that she has a listening dragon makes me think that she's gonna
Right.
find some things out.
Right, yeah,
So I
exactly.
really hope that her listening dragon and her become some add a little bit of like spy
Yeah.
elements
See,
to
that's
the
what I
next
was
book or
thinking, because if you
something.
have a listening dragon way over there, I would, from what I understand, these special dragons are connected, period. They don't
Yes.
need a human. They can, kind of communicate amongst themselves.
Yeah, well, and the fact that they seem to connect to Liz and Lucy. Like the listening dragon was sitting on the car. There's no way Lucy
And
could have
Lucy
heard the
knew.
conversation,
Yeah.
but she knew. So do they just have connections with all dragons?
I think the
It
special
seems
dragons
so.
for
Yeah,
sure.
and that's
Yeah.
why I think Grace has to be a special dragon.
Yeah, exactly.
Because I'm like, then why was she able to connect to Lucy?
Yeah.
That seems a little crazy.
Well,
And you know that those dragons that she's selling at the little like farmers markets and things and stuff are
yeah,
not
they're
special.
nothing, yeah.
They're just
Although I do think it's
clay.
cool that she's big enough to where, I mean, just people all around her town have them. Like
Mhm.
the gardener guy, his wife had one that's
Yep.
always on the mantle, and
Yep, and
so
the guy at the market,
yeah,
all the yeah.
yeah. It seems like these things are pretty big, and for an artist to be able to sell sculptures and make a living, like
Right.
these must be some cool ass
Right. They must
dragons.
be good, yeah.
Um,
And to be fair, it is the late 90s, early
yeah,
2000s,
that's when
so
it
it
was
was a
big.
little easier to live back then than it is now.
Yeah, a little bit cheaper. Inflation's not real.
Yeah, I think if I started making clay dragons, I would not be able to
Make a living.
make a living off that,
Etsy,
even if
Etsy.
they were really good.
Well, and clay's hard, man. I remember taking a ceramics class, and
Yeah,
I,
I just love the fact that he was so like, there's no freaking kiln, there's no oven,
right,
there's no like,
right,
how are you making it? And that Sophie brushed that off too. She said, "Oh, maybe it's just a special kind of clay that doesn't need that." And it's like,
right.
"Girl, come on." He's literally telling you to your face, "There's no kiln, there's no oven." She went in there herself too. She saw there
Right.
wasn't one.
When I was reading that, my thought could have been like maybe she has some setup somehow where the sun hits the window perfectly,
Right,
and
like
then
he
it
said
was
that. He
like,
was like, "Maybe the sun bakes them, I guess."
yeah,
But like, if you know about clay,
it's not
that's not
enough.
enough.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
not for what I imagine the size of these dragons were. Maybe for something very, very small, but not for these dragons.
yeah. I picture these things like 7 to 10 inches.
Yeah, I pictured him like, yeah, less than a foot,
Yeah,
definitely. And I mean, the fact that they could hold, when they talked about like Lucy holding the dragons, it was always in two hands. So I knew it had to be, at least too big for a child to hold it in one hand.
right.
Like at least bigger than that. But yeah, I don't imagine that they're very, very big.
Okay, what else you got?
As far as theories, that's the only, I think we've kind of covered everything I
Okay.
had thought about.
So then thinking ahead,
hmm
what do you either think you're going to see or what do you want to see in book 2?
I mean,
'Cause
I
it
might be rushing it, but I definitely want to know where, like, where this powers come from, like, her
yeah,
ability to make these dragons, and
yeah.
and
'Cause
and I
this
wanna know if she is a dragon, like, I wanna know if her and Lucy are dragons, because there was a part in this book where Lucy does something, she runs off, whatever, and Liz refers to her as a little dragon,
I
and
never made that
there was a
connection.
part of me that was like, "Okay, was that just because they just reference dragons so much in this house, or was that, like, a little bit of a slip of the tongue? She
Right.
accidentally said called Lucy a
Well,
dragon."
and when I mean, this is could totally be not something, but that also makes me think about when they call their sickness dragon pox.
Right.
You know, like, yeah,
Yeah.
everybody has chicken pox, everybody gets the sniffles, and that's how they play it. They just
Mhm.
brush it off as, oh, that's just what we call it. But
Yeah.
what if that really is? And then,
Right.
so one thing that you keep bringing up about these people being special,
Mhm.
Liz and Lucy, obviously, because they're connected somehow. Guilana is some ancient weird
Something,
thing,
yeah.
but then that makes me wonder, how did David get special? Because David is supposed to be this complete outsider,
Mhm.
stranger that comes into this
Yeah.
completely unknowing. And that's the
Mhm.
other thing. So from what I understand, I don't remember a mention of David's parents either.
No. Mm-mm.
So I would think that there'd be at least some kind of offhand mention,
Yeah.
but I mean, maybe he just moved from so far away.
My assumption is that he got accepted into a college in this area, moved there, and then had to find a place to live, and so he looked for, someone who had a room to rent. And so I don't know how I don't feel like he has any type of, like, familial or, like, ancestral connection.
Yeah,
Maybe he does, I mean, maybe that's what it is, like, maybe, like, people that had ancestors that interacted with dragons in their day,
way
like,
long time
maybe
ago.
that's
Okay.
those people are able to
Yeah, like two
sense,
ancient
and that, like,
houses.
yeah, and that, like, Liz and Lucy are people that can sense that in other people, like, they know
Yeah,
if that person
okay.
is, like, worthy or not, in a sense. But I also kind of like the idea, and this is just, I think this is as a person who wishes that, like, there was real magic in the world, and I mean, I think there is in a sense, but I kind of like the idea that there's nothing special about them.
Yeah,
They're just people that other than, like, who they are just as a person. Like, they sensed, like, something about David's character, and they were
yeah,
like, "He's somebody who is worthy of this." And
yeah.
not because it's in his blood or because he's destined to, but just because he's a good guy.
Well, and so far it's been that way.
Right.
He's not had
Well, and
anything.
Sophie, if Sophie is someone who was given a special dragon, is it because her bloodline is special, or is it just
That is
because
true.
she had a big heart, she saved these squirrels, she's just a good person,
Right.
you
Yeah,
know?
volunteering for a wildlife animal
Right.
hospital.
Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So I'm like, I like the idea that maybe it's just good people just get this opportunity.
Yeah, and that makes sense because even I mean we only had a couple of interactions with the gardener George, but he was kind of rough around the edges, but he seemed like a good
Right.
person, and he had one. It might not have been a special dragon, but
Right.
they had a dragon. So it seems
Yeah.
like Liz has some form of knowing and being
Yeah, she
able to
can, like,
filter.
tell who's worthy or not. And
Yeah.
like I said, maybe it's because of some sort of bloodline thing, or maybe it's just because she's like, no, this person's heart is good.
Hmm.
You know?
Yeah. One thing I do want to bring up is the next book is Kaylee was talking about Ice Fire. When I was starting to go through and wanting to do this series again, I remember the second book being very big because the first one is very centered on getting to know the characters and really this whole series. I think what sucked me in, and Kaylee brought this up before, that even though the series is supposed to be about dragons, it's really more about the bond between people and how the people interact, and that continues throughout the entire series. It's always um, how you're affecting what you're doing and consequences to your actions. And I think that's what really kept me sucked in because again, there's a million and one stories about dragons. Dragons aren't new. Some people are fascinated by them, but it's a dragon.
Yeah.
They all have big teeth, they all have big claws, they all breathe fire. But the second book is really where things jump off and start becoming more of a David's story,
Hmm.
and Liz and Lucy become the facilitators and really. just push it through. But so I was searching it, and this is all a roundabout way of me saying I was trying to search it and find the series again, and I searched Ice Fire, and it kept bringing up Game of Thrones because that whole series, like this one is called the Last Dragon Chronicles. That one for Game of Thrones is called A Song of Ice and Fire. So I don't want people to get confused. The next book is not going to be Game of Thrones. It is going to be the second book in the Last Dragon Chronicles, Ice Fire. Has no connections. There are dragons, and we get taken a weird couple places, but just know we're not talking about Jon Snow. Um, Other than that, Kaylee, do you have any questions or anything else you want to bring up?
Not really, honestly. I think we covered most of the things that I thought about. I mean, I'm excited to read more, honestly, to read the next book and hopefully come back and talk about that too.
That makes me feel good because I really wanted to share this series, and I know that not everybody's gonna love it, and especially with this first book being so out there on a concept, or at least
Hmm.
to me, because like I said, it's a dragon series that's not about dragons.
Right.
But it's going to be a fun journey. Thank you guys so much for joining me. I'm planning on having more people come on through as a guest. Kaylee, do you have any plugs or anything that you want to talk about? What are you doing?
Yeah. Do you want to get to that after that question?
Oh, yeah, thank you,
Yeah, of
actually.
course.
So, every time I have a guest on, I would like to ask them a specific question, and I want to have like 5 questions so that when they come on, they'll have a different one. But everybody's first appearance will have the first question, and then so on. Second appearance, second question, blah blah. So this first question is going to be. In this series, everybody that gets a special dragon, the special dragon has either a feature or some kind of items um, that show you what's special about that dragon or for their abilities. Gadzooks has the pencil and pad, Grace has the shell ears, Gruffin has his little book of procedures.
Hmm.
So my question is to my guest coming on is what would your dragon have? Is it going to be a nice and pretty one? What utensils or tools are you going to use? What would your dragon be?
Okay, so you asked me this question, and I wasn't able to like answer it until I finished the book, definitely, because I needed to understand the dragons better. And even afterward, I finished the book and I was like, I don't know. And so, this is what I was telling you earlier that I wanted to save for the podcast. I didn't want to
Oh,
tell
okay,
you.
yeah.
I decided to do what Liz told David to do and dream it.
Oh,
So,
wow.
as soon as I finished the book, I took a nap.
Wow. That's some dedication too.
And so I took a nap, and as I was falling asleep, I kept repeating to myself, like, okay, what's my dragon? What's my dragon? And so I would have kind of a mantra, and I dreamt it.
Wow.
And for people that know me personally, I am a very intuitive person. My intuition has always been really strong. And so dreams kind of are something that tends to like speak to me.
Hmm.
My husband is similar in that sense. He's had like prophetic dreams, and so that's just something that like I was when she said dream it in the book, I was like, I'm gonna do that. So um, this was difficult for me regardless because initially I thought I don't think of myself as like I'm this type of person.
Right.
I'm that type of person. I don't think of myself that way at all. And I don't really feel like other people think of me as anything specific either. Like I have friends that I'm like, "Oh yeah, they are all about X, all about Y, all about Z." But I'm not really that kind of person. And so I really connected with David in this like thinking about this question because he was confused as to why his dragon was a writer. When he first saw the pencil and the
Yes.
pad, he was like,
Yes.
"What does that have to do with me?"
Especially because he was going for I don't even remember what he was going to school for. It has
It's
nothing.
like environmental sciences or
Yeah,
something like
yeah, I
that.
was gonna
Yeah.
say it has nothing to do with
Yeah.
writing.
He talks a lot about like weather and environment and stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, and so he was confused like what this writing has to do with me. Like he didn't think of himself as that person. And so I kind of started to think maybe that my dragon wouldn't be so obvious to me either.
Mm,
And so that's why I decided I was going to dream it. And so I figured it out. I think that my dragon would not necessarily be like, I think some people that know me would be like, oh, it's an artist dragon. And they would have a paint like a
Yeah.
paintbrush and a palette, and I was like, but
It's
that doesn't
too,
speak to
yeah,
me.
too
That's
obvious.
too yeah, that's too, like, surface level for me. And so when I dreamed about her, I realized that my dragon is a feeler dragon.
Oh,
And
okay.
so she would be someone that helps me with that intuition gift that I believe that I have. So she would kind of help me with that and like help me like realize and understand this gift that I have better. Just like David's dragon
Yeah.
helped him,
Would it be like a almost like an empath dragon where would it
not necessarily feeler in the empath sense, but more feeler in the like um in like intuition and like kind of just like helping lead,
okay.
like lead away.
Okay. So then this brings me to another question
Yeah.
because David interacts with Gadzooks well first just by picturing him and then Gadzooks
Yeah.
is writing down the picture, right? Using
Yeah.
his utensils. So then with the feeler dragon, I'm not really sure what tools they would have. How would you picture them interacting with you?
Yeah, so the way that I would picture the interaction, if the dragon is wherever she is, windowsill, whatever, that I would just kind of see her in my mind's eye and more feel her in my heart, and that she would kind of like, if I'm like, oh, should I do this? I might see her nod, like, yeah, like you got that,
Okay.
or like, no, 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 think about it again,
I like
and
that.
kind of help like guide me without telling me what to do.
Yeah, see, so that I think that works really well actually because when David's picturing it, he's reaching out with his mind, right?
Yeah,
So that's how he's interacting, and then
yeah,
Liz seems to interact with them in almost every way, shape, or form.
yes, yeah,
Whether it's her magical connection or whatever, that she has that sense of just being connected, like you
yeah,
were saying, no matter what. So I think it would make sense, especially if you're a feeler dragon, to reach out with your heart
yeah.
and be able to have that quick communication without communicating,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly. And so, yeah, one of the things I wrote down is like that's something that I think that I often like overlook in myself, and I'm trying to understand better and bring out my own intuition so I can follow it better. Because I've always kind of had like a weird sixth sense about things, and like I know that that's something that if I work on that will grow and that will get stronger. And so I like the thought that my dragon would help me to further that like gift that I already naturally have, which I think that's what David's dragon does too.
That's great. You put way more thought into it than mine. Mine was very surface level.
Oh yeah, I
So,
even like thought about what I think she'd look like.
oh, give
Like,
us a little
okay,
description.
yeah. So I think she would be very like moody blue.
Okay.
Which, again, if you know me, you know that's my color. But yeah, I think she would be kind of like a dark blue, but I like the thought that her scales would kind of be a gradient. So as it gets to the
Mm,
tip, they'd kind of go to like a light lavender color.
yeah.
And I pictured her as having like bigger, rounder ears and like big, like downturned eyes because she's intuitive. So like the ears and the eyes are, are open and aware at all times,
Yeah. Okay.
but that she would have a very smaller like mouth and stuff because, she listens and she looks, she doesn't speak so much, she feels.
We listen and we don't judge.
And yeah, I kind of like I liked the thought that her eyes would always kind of look glossy, like she was crying, but obviously not in the bad way,
Right, right.
you
Okay.
know.
I like that.
But yeah, that was how I pictured my dragon. I think that's what she would be. And I did not think of a name for her yet because I felt like that needed to come to me and it
Mm,
hasn't yet.
okay. I
So
can wait.
next time I'm on,
You know
if I
what?
have the name, I'll let you guys
I
know.
think that'll be a great second question. First
Mhm.
question will be your dragon.
Yeah.
Second one will be what's the name of the
Yeah.
dragon, so you get some time. Because I do
Yeah, cuz
like,
I want the name to come to me.
yeah, that's awesome. It makes me feel good that one of my best friends is connecting with this material enough to also feel this way. Because
Yeah.
I've been wanting to talk to somebody about this series for so long, and just nobody knows it because it's
Mhm.
not.
It's very obscure,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's very obscure. But so I'm ecstatic. I can't wait for the journey to keep going. The first couple of books, it does get out there once you get to like book 6, but hopefully by that point you guys are sucked in anyway and you're stuck. But
I yeah, I already am, so.
yeah, yeah, this is awesome. If you guys have any questions or comments or anything of that manner, please reach out. My email is gadzooks, the last DM at gmail.com. And I will be putting links in to Kaylee's stuff. She's got some stuff going to. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure, yeah, I'll give like a little blurb.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I am an artist and I do have like an art Instagram, which Diego will link that. But I am gonna be starting to stream soon. I've enjoyed like watching and playing horror video games for a long time. That's just a weird thing that I really enjoy is like horror movies, horror books. That's like my favorite genre usually to read is horror stuff. So, and I realized that I couldn't find the specific type of like person that I wanted to watch stream. And so I decided why not become that person. So yeah, Diego's gonna link that stuff as well. There's nothing out there yet, but there will be soon. So maybe follow and wait.
Yeah. And you know what, guys? I just to leave you with a little bit of an inspirational message to end this episode and go into book two. This really worked out very well. But if you guys have something of this manner, just do it. I like Haley said, she couldn't find the niche that she wanted, so now she's going to be that person. I am doing this podcast because I love this series, and when I was looking on, all the sites, I couldn't find any podcasts. There was no audio books for them either, and there was like two YouTube videos from I think the most recent one was 6 years ago. So that was my thought too. There's nothing here. I'm gonna do it. If you guys have a project that you can't find, that you're not the only one. There's going to be a minimum of at least a couple million other people that are interested somewhat in that subject too. So do it. There's no reason to not. You're going to grow on the job and you're going to grow as you're going. You have to start somewhere. Just take a listen to my first episode. So, um, just do it. Enjoy the story. We've got quite a few. We got 7 books total. The second one will start next week. And thank you very much. This is DM signing out. Have a safe flight out with no turbulence, and we'll see you next week. Do you have a little sign out?
Bye.